Here we go.
Tony Caravan.
You've been subjected to a highly sophisticated form of propaganda.
It's just what you need, and not what you don't.
Hello. 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 Hello.
Quality, quantity, and variety.
Rock Flux.
And good morning for another edition of Tony Caravan Live. The webcast, worldwide webcast, podcast. I just listed it through Mastodon. We'll see how that goes. If anybody wants to tune in from that area of this vast network, this web of lies that we're all a part of.
Channel check. Left channel. Left channel.
Yeah. It's raining here, and it's going to rain for the better part of the day. You're listening to The Morning Show. I'm Tony Caravan, and this is emanating from my Rock Flux channel on YouTube, and I'm trying to disseminate it out through various sources, around the net. This is a beret. Some call me a beat poet. Others call me an author. Auteur. Anyway, I scanned through YouTube, when I came on just to set this thing up. And when I look at the various title cards, as I call them, the YouTube's version of the meme, the clickbait that gets people to tune in to these various webcasts, whatever they call them, vlogs. And, it just gets more and more absurd by the day. The posers, the YouTube millionaires, and their wives, right? It's just funny. I mean, it's crazy. I'm going to try, we're coming up on, well, we're not even coming up on anymore. It is the July 4th holiday weekend. So how about, I'm situated in the mid-Atlantic states, and here's the
Weekend weather.
and see if this doesn't mess up my feed. It's looking like currently here in my neck of the woods, which comes up through the northern Appalachians. I'm kind of surrounded by those, but then they continue up to the northeast. But I'm not in the northeast. I'm closer to I'm like east of the Ohio Valley, but in the mid-Atlantic area. It's one of those geographical regions in the U.S. that are just impossible to describe, unless you literally show someone a visual. And I'm not going to do that. It's 63 degrees now, telling me on my little weather monitor. And it's going to be a high of maybe 70 degrees today, 57 for the low. Saturday, 73 degrees for the high, another 57 for the low. And then Sunday it pops back up to 81 degrees, 63 overnight. And then next week we're looking like 88 in the day, 70 at night. So we'll be back to that kind of like summery weather. And, well,
Weekend weather.
that's your weekend weather. If you're planning some kind of vacation, you want to max out your credit card, go ahead and do it. I think it's a waste of time. Personally, I'd buy one of those baby pools, get a couple lawn chairs, put your feet in the pool, get a bucket of sand, and you could stick your hand in the sand if you want to. I used to have a friend in high school once I think he wrote in a yearbook when they had yearbooks. I don't know if they still have them. And he said sometimes he likes to stick his hand in the sand of the ashtrays. Back then you could smoke, they had an ashtray, those, tall things at the entranceway to the high school, where you would put out your cigarette, because those were smoking days. And he had a line. Sometimes he would like to put his hand in the ashtray and dream of California Girls, the song California Girls. Anyway.
Your papers, please.
I'm just amazed that when I noticed that this happens to me every day. We talk about it often, and it's preposterous, but somehow my frame rate has gone down to about 8.2 frames per second. And so if you're watching this as opposed to just listening to it as a podcast, you can hear the sound of my voice. But if you're watching it, I am completely out of sync and on the verge of basically freezing up. And I have literally no applications opened, and my system is literally dual quad processor, 16 gigs of DRAM. Like I say, no applications open. I've checked my activity monitor and I've got like zeros across the board, and very low CPU usage. It's a cold day, and there's just no reason whatsoever. So as it says in my description, I'm basically being fun. But nonetheless, let's keep going on. So I look at these poser title cards, memes, whatever you want to call them on YouTube. And I see they're still talking about that YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain. And I'm having upload kilobytes per second of near 6,000 kilobytes per second upload. And anyone who knows the internet, there are very few people that even have some people don't even have 6 kilobytes per second upload. Insane. 30 frames per second. I'm back in sync, but YouTube's still giving me showing me a frozen picture in my analytics monitor. Okay, enough of that tech talk for the day. Let's hope we move on from that. So back to these memes by these YouTube millionaires. And when I say YouTube millionaires, I mean these people who started out. I've talked about this before. I mean, when you do 300 some videos, repetitiveness is goes without saying. But these people, they start out and they're living in like a mobile home of some kind, or they're roughing it in some kind of tent, and they're saying we're going to live off the grid, and they're out there and they're going to build a house or build a homestead and do all this, that, the other, and they gain tens of thousands, and then ultimately they get that beautiful plaque in the mail. It says 100,000 subscribers, and then they post it in some place behind them or what have you. Meanwhile, they end up making hundreds of thousands, if not $1 million. And they're no longer living in this mobile home. They're no longer off the grid. They're suddenly setting up power. I told the one story about the guy who bought an airplane, literally bought himself a plane. And he was, this was like supposedly this struggling couple. Girl and guy decide to make it on their own, build their own house. Crazy. And accepted boxes and gifts from people, would send them things, right? As if they were these poor, pathetic people. But they were basically living like from the upper middle class people. And I've seen this countless times. And you know what I'm talking about if you ever watch YouTube, some of these YouTube channels. It's like they're constant, even the biggies. I saw one guy, and I don't want to criticize him because I kind of like the guy. But, just yesterday I noticed the card. I won't even click on the thing when I see these things. But, on his title card was, look what I just bought. And it was some, like skid steer or some, whatever, excavating machine or whatever. These things aren't exactly cheap. And so they're constantly buying things. Their houses the house that they were supposedly just building as a off-grid homestead turns out to be some kind of A-frame mansion, right? With every modern appliance under the sun. It's the absurdity of it is, but what I don't get is you look and you'll see that they have 497,000 views on this title card that's boasting about, look what we bought. Like, it just seemed to me human nature at least 10 or 20 years ago would have been like, screw you, Yeah, we all supported you because you were, crying the blues and this, that, the other, and now you're like just, pushing this stuff into people's faces. I don't know. I think it's funny. I don't care. I have everything I have. It's just something I noticed. And the other second thing I noticed is that this whole thing of the unspeakable plague thing. There's still a whole row of that, it is the year 2021, and we are actually in the summer of 2021. We have had many days where the UVB rays of the sun have pretty much sanitized the better part of the former United States, as I call it. And I don't want to get into details. I talk directly with people, and a lot of people who are getting complications from the other unspeakable thing that's tied into the unspeakable thing. And those complications have resulted in fatalities. So, man, I'll tell you, it's just one of those things that just gets to me, and I can't believe it. It's no wonder.
I've resigned. I will not be pushed, filed, stamped, indexed, briefed, debriefed, or numbered.
Yeah, and that's the truth. It's crazy. But anyway, it's going to be a miserable day here, but nonetheless.
All hit music, solid rock and gold. Wow, it's Friday.
There's a war being fought by people on the fringes of society. The ones that the system worked too well on.
That's one of my beat poetry tracks. I can't play too much of it. They give me copyright strikes on my own music. If you're not familiar with some of my music, check it out. Just ask your favorite Echo Dot or whatever controls your voice commander to play the music of Tony Caravan. I got about 2 hours worth of music, nonstop. Currently, here's my favorite song of my own.
I dropped my overpriced smartphone and it shattered. Surprisingly, my first thought was that I was free. Free from the virtual cage that tethers us but tears us apart. Free from the notifications, replies, and requests.
Yeah, so as you can guess from that song, and anyone who's been following me all along, you know, the smartphone's a nice tool, and I guess it's great for podcasting, listening to a podcast. Just don't put it in your pocket because your sperm count's going to go down to 0. Don't put it too close to your head because research has shown that it probably end up giving you a brain tumor. Other than that, it's kind of a neat thing. But it's crazy. But I don't want to be too serious, so come on, let's...
Really funny. Really funny.
Yeah, let's have a little bit of humor. And let's ask our sidekick what she thinks.
Okay.
You know, she says the same thing every day. I don't know. Anyway, so apart from all of this crazy news, which I've cut the cord long enough ago that I don't pay any attention to it. It's in your face on the internet, and you just can't help it. And I know there's a lot of people out there doing vlogging, podcasting, webcasting, whatever you want to call it, that, you know, just manage to, you know, get into these issues day in, day out. Quite frankly, I don't know how they get away with it. Because for me, every time I talk about the unspeakable, right, and there are many unspeakable things now, which I can't figure out because doesn't the First Amendment start out with the thing, Congress shall make no law, and one of them is like abridging freedom of speech, right? So in other words, that Section 230 or something is literally unconstitutional. They don't even have to, like, there doesn't need to be an EO or Congress do anything about it. The fact of the matter is the court should just be standing up for it right away and say, hey, you can't abridge free speech. You know, because it's not hate speech. It's not yelling fire in a theater to say that, to tell the truth, right? It's very fascinating to see how this country fell and how Western civilization fell so quickly. And how people just sat there and while they were binge watching television shows or glued to the news, they just let this all happen. They don't care. You know, that's the real takeaway. That's the real scary part about you know, what's going on right now. You know, we're more so than what's going on right now. But you know, it doesn't matter. There are so many categories these days that people are getting into that are just completely off the rails. And yet millions upon millions of people are accepting it and are getting into lockstep and following this like a cult. Like I call it, a cult of personality. You've got the Save America cult, and then you've got the Build Back Better cult, and of course you have the Great Reset cult, which is kind of tied into the Build Back Better cult. But I call it like, you know, if you're not watching this visually, it's like this unholy alliance triangle, right? This triumvirate, right? And so in effect, and at the top of it, it's just an organized crime syndicate that's basically, you know, ushering in authoritarianism. You know, and the Davos set, they openly admit this. I mean, the World Economic Forum, they talk about this. They know what they're doing. They're not afraid to admit it. You know, they cover it on Bloomberg and the CNBC, the various financial networks, Fox Business. Anybody's got a business show, Davos, World Economic Forum is a red carpet event. People just accept this thing. But they're all, like I say, Save America and Build Back Better are two sides of the same counterfeit coin. I mean, that's what it is. You know, it's bullshit is what it is. But, you know, believe what you want to.
Hey, buddy, how's it going?
Well, I'll tell you how it's going, man. It's like, it's going all right. You know, I woke up at 2 o'clock this morning and I thought it was like maybe 4. And I'm like, okay, I'm ready to get up because I was actually semi-refreshed. You know, it's like you're laying back in bed. And then I realized, asked the old name who I can't speak because I have one in the other room, and whenever I say it, it kind of like, it's very sensitive, and it, you know. But anyway, I said, what time is it? It was like 2 something. Man. So anyway, I went back to sleep till about 4 something. Currently, it's 5:48 a.m. Eastern Standard Time in the former United States. It's July 2nd in the calendar year 2021. In case you're one of those people buried underneath 1,000 feet of ice in some government shelter because of the solar outburst that occurred, right? We talked about that yesterday a bit and in some previous shows. I'm drinking, for those who are just hearing slurping instead of seeing it, out of the morning show mug, camping mug. I'm drinking the Diet Cola. Before that, I had a little bit of yogurt with some coconut flakes, unsweetened, a little bit of a spoonful, less than a spoonful of oatmeal thrown in, just in the container you get from the store, which I had delivered to my house. And about, I don't know, almost a dozen blackberries that I picked from my own backyard, which I'm in the process of like creating a food forest over the past 5 years. And I've got an apple tree that now is about 8 feet tall that actually was grown from a seed of an apple that I ate. Next to it, I have another tree coming up it's about 2 years behind it. And of course, I've got more lettuce and kale and herbs and things like that growing than I could supply a supermarket if I wanted to. And I don't have a lot of land. I have a very small footprint. The width of my property, I'm not connected. My house is just a standalone house. But it's only 19 feet wide. But it's about 190 feet long, the lot. And at the very end of the lot, I have a detached garage. And that area in the back is a south-facing area, so it gets sun, all day long. And I have a little patio there. I built a little mini greenhouse the size of a TARDIS, if you're a Doctor Who fan. And I keep my garden in that area, and so everything grows well. I'm growing jalapeno peppers, banana peppers. I've got tomatoes that are already, pretty big. Nothing's turned red yet, ripened. I just actually finished my beans, or my pea plants. I yanked them out. And of course, much earlier, I had a pretty good crop of radishes. I've got potatoes that I could pull out if I want to, but I'm going to leave them in there. I get carrots growing, you name it, sunflowers, a couple stalks of corn I'm hoping to get, and, the usual stuff. I mean, the people planting their gardens. The biggest things that I'm keeping my fingers crossed on are squash. I want zucchini and some yellow summer squash. I like that stuff. And I have carrots growing. So what happens is, I start getting food from my garden, things like lettuce and, peas and beans and radishes. You'll get, I plant early, and I protect against the frost. And so I'll get that stuff, in May, So by June, I have so much lettuce, I don't know what to do with it. So I'm eating salads every day, different kinds of lettuce. And I've got various herbs, growing that I could, everything from parsley, sage, oregano. I've got the size of bushes. Cilantro for salsas, you name it. Anyway, that's what I do. And I also have grapevines growing, but they haven't yielded yet. They take a couple years to mature, so they say. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed on that. I drink a lot of caffeine, and sometimes it gives me some, gas. Because I'm just a human being, It's like I don't do a lot of pretend. This show is like reality, It's like I don't play any games. I'm not a poser. Some people could say, well, why are you wearing that beret? That's just to bring home the whole idea that I'm a beat poet and that I have this beat poetry out there. And granted, it's not all good. I mean, I don't pretend to be a great writer, a great songwriter, or any of those things, right? Not even a great podcaster. But at least I do my thing. I'm broadcasting this show. It's in black and white if you're watching the video. And behind me I have a set of an old AM radio, an old-fashioned dial telephone. There's a calculator on my desk, tubes, things like that. And it's the idea of a throwback to a time, when at least there was some sanity. Not that the 50s or the 60s were great times, they were tumultuous times. But I'll tell you what, compared to all of the insanity and the lies that went on back then, what's going on right now in this former U.S. that's gradually falling to just imploding, there's just no comparison. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. Because a lot of people, when I say former United States, they take offense to that. It's just like people, I'm going to move my head. Got a little American flag, small American flag back there above the Andy Warhol. And of course, also, if I move the head further, it's hard to see. It's very dark right now. Since it's overcast outside and it's, it hasn't even reached 6 a.m. yet, the lighting in this area is pretty dark. But what I'm getting at is this. When an empire falls, it's not like turning a light switch off. It's not even a particular one election, as some people would, might want to see it. But when it falls, there's two things you have to keep in mind. One, it doesn't come back. All right? The phoenix doesn't rise from the ashes. So that's why Save America is, an exercise in futility. I've already talked why Build Back Better is an exercise in futility, because that's coordinated with the Green New Deal. So the idea is you cannot have a $6 trillion or whatever $1 trillion, infrastructure bill, right, that's going to, rebuild all these bridges, roads, and infrastructure using heavy equipment that requires carbon-based fuels when included in the bill, or previous bills and other bills, in line, are to basically eliminate carbon fuels. And I'll still say it, and I say it all the time, I'm still seem to be the only one in this country that seems to have put those two things together. In other words, you cannot run a crane, an excavator, a skid steer, a dump truck, a bulldozer, a fire truck, or an even heavy-duty ambulance without carbon-based fuels. So you eliminate carbon-based fuels in a carbon-based society, and that society ceases to exist. So that's that. Right. Now, the second part of that is the idea of, like, let's just look at an example of any other empire that we know of. And there are many empires that have come and gone over, the millennia that we're just simply not aware of. History has intentionally forgotten. We think that there's revisionist history going on now, and you're correct if you think that, because it's the truth. They are revising history all the time. But this is not a new phenomenon. History has always been revised for over thousands of years. It did whatever, it was revised to fit whatever and whomever was in power at the time. So if it was the church, there were revisions made. If it was a king of a particular nation, history was revised. And this is how it is. There were empires that people aren't even aware of that existed, in Europe and just east of Europe. People just aren't even aware they existed and flourished for centuries. So some empires fall because of conquest, all right? Some empires are just forgotten, unfortunately, because history forgets them intentionally. But then other empires just basically do what is happening now here in the former United States, as I call it. And that is, like, you could take the Roman Empire, for example. People think, how could you say the U.S. has fallen, the former United States? It's still here, Look, there's there's Washington. There's an election coming up in 2022. No, it doesn't work that way. When Rome fell, you still had Italy. All right? The idea is it's not some thing where suddenly the country vanishes and the ground becomes grown over with grass, though that's happened down in Central and South America with some of those ancient cultures. They're still discovering buildings and structures down there that they didn't even know existed. The sheer size of those empires in the southern hemisphere that have, again, been kind of erased from history is amazing. But we're talking about this country, the U.S. of A., the former U.S. of A. And so what we came to know as the United States simply no longer exists. And it's America, or as the British say, it's America. They put that R on the end of everything. America. And so America will continue. I mean, it's becoming some sort of pseudo-socialist, communist, authoritarian, totalitarian potential police state, or a combination thereof, and depending on what zone you may live in, you might have more freedom than others, or less taxes than others, and less oppression than others, and more adherence to what was once the Constitution of the United States and the law of the land. But generally speaking, over these airwaves that I'm talking to you through, and they are airwaves, whether it, no matter which way you look at it, it's an airwave, to a Wi-Fi router. It's an airwave if it's being sent up into a satellite and disseminated that way. It's an airwave, however. So I use the word worldwide webcast on my screen, my black and white screen. But what I'm saying is that I go back to that First Amendment line: Congress shall make no law. All right. And when you take away the Constitution, the basic rights of a nation, all right, and you allow those laws, those basic rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, when you take that stuff away, and it's been taken away, and years pass by, and years have passed by, then it is the former United States of America. And there's no one going to come along and resurrect that. Because what happens in a country like this, where you have tens of thousands of bureaucrats in dozens and dozens of bureaucracies, all right, numbering into the millions, as you look across the United States and various alphabet agencies and other government formations, it becomes institutional. And it's like the old expression, trying to turn a battleship. And on top of that, we have a nanny state. So people become conditioned. Young people become indoctrinated. People who are glued to the media. And when I say media, I don't just mean the television media, cable TV, broadcast media, traditional broadcast media networks. I mean social media, all media, right? And that's propaganda and lies that come out of there. Anyone with a brain knows that. Anyone who's studied, history, science, geography, biology, virology, knows these things. And that is the problem. And there is no solution to that problem. Because in this nanny state, once children are turned over after maternity leave to the state, and I don't care if it's a private, daycare center, or it's some sort of government funded, daycare center that leads into kindergarten, and then, primary grade school that goes into junior high and then high school, and then these colleges that just people take out these exorbitant loans, but they really don't get a degree and they know nothing. So these people are 22 years old, they've got a college degree in something but they have no trade. And what I mean by a trade doesn't necessarily mean knowing how to fix a pipe, use a hammer, or run a skid steer, for example. A trade means knowing anything, knowing how things work, knowing how to fix things, knowing how to, understanding how a society functions, right? The necessary elements that go into a society in order for its people to live a quality of life, liberty, and a pursuit of happiness. And we're past that stage, generationally. So it's not a matter of some cult of personality of an individual that's going to come and save the day, or a particular party that may be in power that is going to do something that they were elected to do, right? Or some overseeing body like, the World Economic Forum that's saying, hey, we can do this better if we kind of oversee it and have this world government of sorts, right? The answer is no. It's authoritarianism. It's totalitarian rule. All right? It's people getting into lockstep. It's what we've seen happen in the early part of the 20th century and the disasters that, came from that. So, it's sad in many ways, to see this going on right now before our faces. But I always try to stress to people and say that, the country's not going to vanish. The physical geographical location's not going to vanish. And depending upon where you live, you may live your life out fairly the same way as you've lived your life over the past so many years. Now, unlike the set behind me and the black and white TV that I'm presenting this program on, it's not going to be like those days. Let's face it. They were the glory days. Like I said, they weren't perfect. We had the Korean War, the Vietnam War, we had unrest, we had the civil rights movement, the feminist movement, and all of those things. But one thing people forget is by the time we reached the mid-70s, the Vietnam War was over. The Korean War had long been over. Okay, conflict, whatever you want to call it. And the civil rights movement and feminist movement were successes. And we entered into a new era. And for the past close to 50 years, let's say 40 years, because this unrest has been bubbling under, fomenting unrest has been bubbling for the past, decade or so. And where they've tried to resurrect things from 50 years ago and pit people against each other and cause this, divisiveness. And that, in effect, it created, terms such as being triggered, right? And all of these other insane things that are going on right now. But, that's the way it is. And what are you going to do? What can one do? Well, what one can do is live your life the best you can live your life. And what I've chosen to do myself is just pick an era. So it's like, hey, I'm living, as far as I'm concerned, it's the 60s. It's the 1960s. As he takes a drink from his morning show mug. I'm living in the 1960s, minus the war and the social unrest. There was some good music back then too, by the way. And I'm a music person, anybody who knows me. So it's just an overview for those of you who may have just tuned in from this. I just added a link to this on a new site, and I'm not exactly sure how it works. I was going to start, a friend of mine was trying to get me to do podcasting through this thing Adam Curry's involved with, this podcasting index. And so I signed up there, and I have a link. I put a thing up this morning, a link about this. So if you found this through that, welcome. You know, I'll be exploring ways of taking the audio version of this show and just making that available as a podcast. Though this show is very much designed as a visual show. And it's not, I mean, from what I've said so far, it doesn't seem that way. But in effect, what I do, and I'll do that now, is that I will bring up images. Right now I'm bringing up a beer. The number one beer in Poland that I had several days ago. And, you know, so I'll bring up images on this show that have to do with what I'm talking about. And, pardon me. In fact, I'm browsing for one right now. And we'll see what we get. My computer's responding very slow lately. And I really don't know why. Other than the fact that I just feel like I'm being throttled by YouTube, and I don't know what to do about that. It's very frustrating. I got this image I just plopped up on the screen for those watching this on YouTube. And it's an image, I'll move my face to the side. It's an image called the Hand of God, and basically what it is, and this isn't a religious reference. This is space, the final frontier, as they say. But the idea that we're not paying attention to what's going on in our solar system right now, and we don't understand. And when I say we, I don't mean me necessarily or you, but we don't seem to understand this idea of how plasma, the electric universe, works, how the sun goes through cycles, you know, like 10,000 year cycles, and it emits a shell, you know, its outer shell, and it comes towards the earth and has caused catastrophic events over the years. So it's a very interesting, you know, it's an interesting phenomenon. You know, these various things that exist in space. Some people call it space-time. I personally don't believe in space-time. Remember, Einstein's theory of relativity is still a theory, just like Darwin it's a theory. And, you know, even the Big Bang theory is obviously, by its very name, is a theory. And while people constantly, you know, scribble numbers and formulae on chalkboards and whiteboards and computers and produce papers, they don't necessarily, they're just numbers that are proving something through mathematics. But mathematics is not proof of a thing, right? Figures lie, liars figure, and I'm not calling mathematicians liars or physicists liars or astrophysicists liars. They're the most intelligent people on the planet. What I'm trying to say is that just because you can prove something by working out a bunch of numbers, you know, on a chalkboard, doesn't mean that that thing in the real world, you know, is fact. And the same goes with many of the people who are involved, and I talk about this often, in things like AI, augmented reality, artificial reality, virtual reality, right? And this fear of the singularity that guys like Elon Musk talk about. It's like I've done my research and due diligence in there. In fact, I have a book back here. It's called Codex. You can see the word code basically, but it's kind of a shadow on there. The book's called Codex. It's available on Amazon. It's one of my later books. My latest book. I'm working on a new book now, but that's my most recent book. It's less than a year old. And it's a book that's kind of part free flow of consciousness, but also there's a lot of questions about the hard problem of consciousness, and I deal with various question things there. It's a very thought-provoking book. I recommend. It's a short read. I recommend you get it. Excuse me. And the idea is just, knowing a thing doesn't necessarily mean a thing is fact. In fact, I produce these shirts. In fact, I'm wearing one now. I'll try to get up without it. I'm in a very tight space, this studio space. This used to be a barber shop, by the way. I bought this house, and it was formerly a barber shop. So I took the barber shop over and turned it into a production studio. I'm going to stand up just to show you this shirt. And it's basically, the shirt says, "You don't know what you don't know." And, this is a beret. And that's available on TonyCaravanLive.com. And this show's I'm not here to sell you shirts, okay? But I'm here to the significance of that statement. You don't know what you don't know. And it follows everything I've been trying to talk about this morning. I mean, think about that. The only way you know about a thing is because someone told you about a thing. Unless you experienced it firsthand with one of your senses. And as I always say on my shows, if you go back and listen to previous shows, life is this experiential thing, and the hard problem of consciousness is that you have a bioelectric brain, all right? And then you have this mind or consciousness that perceives the world in the first person. That's referred to by modern science as the hard problem of consciousness, because they really don't have any proven theorem even on how consciousness comes into being, how the brain creates consciousness. I mean, that's their idea, that the brain creates consciousness. The religious believe this, instead of consciousness, we'll use the word soul. Some New Agers might call it spirit, spirituality or something like that. Different other Eastern religions. So life, for the sake of it, is what I call sometimes it's like a soul experience. You've got these 5 senses, maybe even a 6th sense. When you think of these CIA experiments, declassified experiments, that's a soda being opened, in remote viewing and things like ESP and stuff that have actually now been somewhat documented. The frauds have been debunked, okay? I don't sit here and pretend to say that people can bend spoons, like that Yuri guy and stuff. Some people have been exposed. But many people, including, like I say, alphabet agencies like the CIA, have conducted successful experiments during the Cold War in remote viewing and have had, have gotten results, documented results. You can see the declassified documents. And of course we know we're constantly lied to. Recently with this whole UFO phenomenon, they've come out and they've danced around it. But still, in even their way of dancing around this idea of UFOs is basically an admission that they've been lying to us all along. Right? It's like with the FDA, I always say. People trust, the FDA. And I say, well, okay, the FDA approves a drug to go on the market. Right. And then a year or two later, you're watching TV, and there's a law firm comes on and says, if you took this drug and you died, that's always the funny line, and you died, or you had serious complications, blah, 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 please contact the law firm of such and such and such and such and get your, settlement. Now, I have two problems with that. One, what kind of process does the FDA have to approve that drug in the first place that 2 years later there's this multi-million-dollar, if not billion-dollar settlement, meaning that the drug, was bad? And two, the media has advertised this drug for those in the interim time and has made, hundreds of millions of dollars, or at least millions and millions of dollars, advertising that drug. And that's, that's another one of these things that people just don't look at and question. Now, this is something that happens on a very regular basis. There's no arguing with that. Every person who has ever turned on a television set, you could do it right now, has seen those law commercials. All right? Right. And then they even have these things, it's your money, right? Well, that's because there's structured settlements they make to collect that money for these fraudulent, or these drugs that basically should never have been approved by the FDA in the first place. And the same goes with foods. And that's the kind of, structural problems we have in this society. And because of the lobbying power of the drug companies, because of the power of the FDA itself, and because of the lobbying and the control of the media and literally the blackmailing by the media. And don't think the media it's not blackmail, right? If you want access to politicians, you rattle feathers, right? You don't go against the media, because then you get blackballed. You don't get coverage. If the media would cover a story like this, they wouldn't get access to, various politicians, etc. When you don't go against, pharmaceutical companies, if you want to get those pharmaceutical. And that's just one example. But the UFO thing was funny to me because, for years they've been making these people out like cranks and, people who wear tinfoil hats because they talked about the UFO phenomenon. Even those who were, straight shooters and who weren't like, out there, like the that Roswell Cafe, whatever it's called. You know what I mean? Sensible people, rational people who talked about this. Former astronauts, that kind of thing. And so they come out and they admit that, we've been studying these phenomenon. We've got videos and pictures of them and, blah, blah, blah. But then they dance around it a little bit saying, but we're not saying they're exactly aliens. But we also are saying that they're not any other country. Well, if it's not somebody else on Earth, then isn't it by default an alien? Unless you're trying to say these people are, David Icke was right, and these are reptilian aliens living underneath the surface of the United States, or Europe, or in Windsor Castle. It's crazy. But I mean, this is the kind of stuff, and that's on the absurd side. But this is the kind of stuff that we deal with. And yet the average person, it goes in one ear and out the other, and they don't question that. And so suddenly the FDA comes out with something, and everyone's quick to accept it. And no one says, you guys have a really, really, really bad track record. Why should we believe anything you say? But no one says that. I say it because it's right before my eyes. It's the same with me saying the former United States. It's like, there's no way. You cannot, and even if, let's throw, because politics has become pop culture now, and yes, and politicians, it's the cult of personality. I mean, you can't deny that either, right? And you can't deny the World Economic Forum's Great Reset, because they've got a freaking website, right? And it's on Bloomberg, and they talk about it on these financial news networks all the time. It's in your face, basically. As he takes a drink of a soft drink. It's 6:29 a.m. Eastern Standard Time in the former United States. And
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
I'm still here. So it's just amazing what's going on. And it just, so I found myself that I don't get caught up in politics anymore. I played that game. But I don't play the game anymore. Homie, don't play that, right? Because it is a game. It's a game by a ruling power elite, who are just holding on to this, wealth and power they've accumulated, who consider them self-appointed rulers of the world, masters of the universe in their own minds, right? Legends in their own minds. Excuse me. And then there's the people on the other side, the nearly 8 billion people on this planet, who basically just are told how to live, what to do by several thousand people who claim to rule over them, is what it really amounts to. And it's nothing new. It's just the scale that has gotten beyond belief. Now you have several thousand people ruling over 8 billion people, as opposed to times when you had these kings in these little castles, ruling over, maybe 10,000 or tens of thousands of people. And then these various little fiefdoms or whatever, scattered throughout. So they're creating this situation now where no one can ever question them. There's wrong speak now. There are things that are unspeakable. If you speak those things, you are instantly silenced. They've got an indoctrination education system revisionist history so that perhaps half the people, at least in what was once Western civilization, because that's crumbled as well, that half the people don't even know the truth about their own history. They have this tunnel vision, this one-sided view, this divisive view, as if there was only one thing that ever happened in the United States, and that was the Civil War, which just lasted a few years. I mean, they don't understand. They have no idea. I've talked before about, you know, child labor, the mines, the Molly Maguires, you know, immigrants building the railroads, you know, all of these other things that have happened. You know, they don't even understand things like the Gulf of Tonkin that was a lie that, you know, got us escalated the Vietnam War. You know, they don't, these things have all been erased. We don't even talk about the fake weapons of mass destruction or Colin Powell's lies in front of the UN. These things have all like just been, you know, lost and gone forever, forgotten, erased, you know. Some call it lies by omission, you know, so it's not so much they even lie about these things anymore. They just omit, they just don't talk about it. They just remove them from the curriculum in schools, or the media never talks about it. If a person comes on and isn't being interviewed and says something, they cut them off. If I were to say certain unspeakable things, this video would be get a strike. You know, 3 strikes, you're out. And they've done that to how many thousands and thousands of people? That's why I don't talk politics anymore. You know, I don't believe in politics anymore. I believe what's happened has happened. I think it's a much more serious issue is to look at the earth changes going on right now from a standpoint of solar activity and a weakening magnetic field that has the potential for catastrophic events within the next decade or two. And that's being totally ignored by, when I say the media, and again, the all-inclusive media now. Excuse me. You know, some people think media think, oh, the New York Times, you know, whatever, CBS. No. Twitter's as much Facebook, YouTube is as much media as Fox or MSNBC. The media controls the flow of information. And those who control the flow of information, and like the shirt that I'm wearing, I tried to hold up before, you don't know what you don't know. Now, I also have this thing where I say everything you know is wrong, you know, which is a stretch in one way, but in many ways, sometimes you gotta wonder. But yeah, if the flow of information is controlled by the, you know, broadly stated, the media, then you don't know what you don't know. And what we don't know is a lot. We don't know a lot of what's going on. But then that leads us to the question of, if you've had generations, and you know, this isn't some new thing. You know, some people, this is the problem with the Save America movement. You know, people get angry with me because everyone wants to take a side. You know, they want to be left, right, red, blue, Republican, Democrat, you know, this, that, you know, socialist, communist, you know, authoritarian, whatever. People are for militarism, right? Like I always say, how are you going to clean up a place like Chicago? What? Send in the National Guard and have them posted on every street and have this, the war with the gangs? That's another thing. America loves to hide things, right? The media hides things. Nobody really they don't really talk about the power of the gangs, like the internal problem in this country, right? I don't know how many millions, but it's a million. I mean, the gang members are the amount of gang members. I mean, remember, we have, excuse me, we have 20,000 homicides, roughly, a year in the United States. 20,000 homicides a year. It's a statistic that's not really spoken much. It means every 10 years, 200,000 people are murdered, type of thing. Killed. Homicides, right? That's an insane amount, of people. In the last 50 years, 1 million people, right? So since the 70s, more or less, that under that statistic, it's like 1 million people were murdered. That's crazy. That's crazy. But then we also have like 650,000 people a year who die of heart disease, and 600,000 people a year die of cancer. And this is insane, and people accept this, and these industries that that are involved in these diseases have been promising cures for decades and decades and decades and decades, but all they've done is make millions of dollars, and their treatments are like the same two treatments: either put you under the knife, or prescribe drugs from big pharma. And that's why I say that this is the former United States, and it's actually a corporatocracy. And what I mean by a corporatocracy is big tech, big pharma. Big tech, of course, has big data, right? And then, of course, we've got, the military contractors. We have the financial network, right? These aren't conspiratorial theories. These are real things, right? Everyone knows who big tech is: Apple, Google, Amazon. Come on. You can name them all. Everyone knows who big pharma is: Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Moderna. We know these names, right? Military contractors, we know the names, right? We talk about the Fed and the central banking system. It's a consortium of banks. You know the names of those banks. None of this stuff is hidden. It's all out in the open, right? These people have meetings. They have offices, they're located all over the country. It's a corporatocracy. That's, and we have this place, when I lived in D.C., K Street, we have lobbyists, and these people are represented by lobbyists, people, power brokers, and they write, the bills, the laws in Congress, and they donate to people's campaigns. And so, in effect, they are the puppeteers, and the politicians are the marionettes. And that's how it works. It's all a big, big organized, structured corporatocracy. And there's this illusion that somehow this is still a democratic republic and elections matter. Elections are exercises in futility, right? Judges are either appointed or elected. If they're elected, they've got campaign financing. If they're appointed by a political party. All right? Everyone is somehow influenced by the corporatocracy. Are there a few independent, firecrackers out there, Yeah, of course there are. But for all the loud, speeches they make, all the times they question this, that, the other, have they made any progress? No. Was the swamp drained last year or the year before? No. Well, why do you think it's going to be drained 4 years from now? Do you see? Everything, when they meet in Davos every year, these ruling elite, they map out what they want to see in the coming year and years. And pretty much so it happens. In fact, included in those Davos meetings and presentations and PowerPoints and at the private parties they have, the social events, it's a big deal. It's covered by the financial networks. None of this is private, secret. The media's there. They're all on the same, they're on the same side. And that side is to rule over, either in the case of the U.S., 320 plus million people, or in the case of the world, to rule over nearly 8 billion people. This isn't like the old days, where people rose up and said, enough is enough. Those days are gone forever. And people just don't seem to get that through their head. And someone says, man, this is depressing what you're saying if this is true. Well, it's not a matter of whether if it's true. It is true. And it's true. Everything I've said, on this webcast is true. I mean, you can document it. All right? It's documented. The thing is, how do you live your life knowing this and in this environment? And the fact is, you just live your life, right? It's like I say, it's your experience. It's your consciousness, right? You have these senses, right? And it's you in the first person, and you live your life. And you are still in control of your life, unless you are physically being oppressed, all right? And when I say physically being oppressed, I don't mean somebody who's triggered by somebody calling them a name, That's not oppression. That's childish schoolyard stupidity and name calling. And the idea that the media even gets involved with that kind of stuff is, I'll tell you, it's laughable. It is. It's laughable. There's just no doubt about it. It really is. It's funny.
Really funny. Really funny.
It's funny. It's funny. It really is. There's no doubt about it. Triggered. Right. Sticks and stones. Get over it. And if you want to be or do something, nobody's telling you can't do it, right? I always say, the laws of the land, the laws have already been passed back 50 years ago. The civil rights movement is over. Trying to media trying to pit people against each other is ridiculous. But I don't want to get into that. That's just too. That's so. It's not even. It doesn't deserve being talked about. Because it's laughable. It's laughable. This is just, the idea that people have gotten millions of people so suckered into donating to causes, and these people they donate the causes to just go out and buy like $1 million home or something like that. Right. or that these ruling elitists, right, just don't, they criticize things, but when it applies to them, they just say, oh, well, I'll do this if I want to. So what? And then the media doesn't dare question them because they don't want to lose access to them. So what do? You do what I do. I tell people right out, I live below the poverty line right now. All right? According to the IRS, if you live below the poverty line, you don't even have to file federal taxes anymore. I don't make enough money to file federal taxes. And you say, well, how are you doing all this stuff? Blah, 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 blah. Well, stuff I acquired over the years, Or last year when remember, the average person in the United States got $3,200, right? First it was $1,200, then it was $600, and then it was $1,400, right? Add it up, $3,200. Well, with my $3,200, I helped improve my, and that was tax-free. And with my $3,200, I got a few extra, wires and things so I could improve my webcast, right? Caught up on some bills, and, I'm living life. I'm growing a garden, and, I'm not a prepper or anything like that. I'm just a regular guy. I listen to music, play music. I don't know if my cat's still here. I've got a cat who's like got a fear of guitar, I was gonna do I like to do this Johnny Cash song that I've been playing around with, and I have like the lyric of it over here because I didn't memorize it, and I should have. But I do so many things. Some people they tell me all the time, hey, like get into this podcasting thing. And comments are opened on this particular thing, and and I'd like to podcast, and I have an RSS, number, and I've got this, I set up this account with this podcasting index and this Mastodon thing. But I'm not really, I don't want to pay a hosting fee for someone, and I'm wondering if there's some kind of way that I can just have this be podcasted, or maybe I don't need to podcast it. Maybe if I could just list it on Index and you can watch it there, and you don't mind seeing my mug, because I like the idea of being able to bring up. I was having these tooth problems, so if you're watching this, you understand. Or this. Remember the tooth. Remember the tooth. I like the idea of being able to bring up visuals. So, to me, this is TV in a sense. But this Johnny Cash rendition of that Reznor song, Hurt, is I'd like to play on the guitar, but my cat looks so comfortable on his little stoop on the other side, I don't want to scare him out of the room. Let's see if I can get the tone down. I hurt myself today to see if I still feel. I focus on the pain, the only thing that's real. So, I hurt myself today to see if I could still feel. I focus on the pain, the only thing that's real. I don't know. It's better if I had the chords, at least I could be more in tune. What a great lyric, though. To see if I focus on the pain to see if I could still feel, you know. But life can be good, is what I'm trying to say. That despite all of this craziness that I've outlined, right? I mean, everything from the former United States to the fall of Western civilization to this country becoming a corporatocracy and to an organized crime syndicate basically running the world. I mean, you know, it's the truth. To the idea of, you know, Earth catastrophe in a sense, in a real sense, it's something you should look into. And I've done shows about it. This idea where our magnetic field is weakening so much and we're susceptible to cosmic rays. The sun's magnetic field is weakening, and that kind of extends over our solar system. And the idea that we're at a point right now that if there were a solar ejection, like kind of like the Carrington event that occurred in the 1800s, that, you know, which took down, literally lit up telegraph pole wires and caused fires, that it could take down our power grid. And that the power grid goes down, you're not texting anybody. There's no more podcasting. You know, there's not even pumps to pump the sewage out of your house or pump the water into your house. You know, we're back in, you know, we're back in basically, you know, primitive times. And they say that the average person is something like 3 meals or 3 days worth of meals away from just totally losing it. You know, and the idea that we're staring down that barrel and that it's a distinct possibility, and there are like peer-reviewed papers being written about this kind of thing, right? PhDs talking about it, and it could occur in the next 10 to 20 years or tomorrow. You know, and you think when you're, you know, and so say none of that happens even, okay, right? But the idea that, you know, I've had cancer surgery a year and a half, I guess it's been about a year and a half ago, all right? In fact, I get my next PSA test in a couple of weeks to see if I'm clean, all right? I keep an upbeat thing, you know, about that kind of stuff. But the idea is when you're, you know, as a nation, as a world, if we're teetering on the brink of a near extinction event or a near catastrophe, or even personally when you get a diagnosis of something like cancer or, you know, or something else, or even a family member, you suddenly see life in a different perspective, or you should. I know myself, you know, I've had several bouts with things. There was one time I thought my heart, I had an AFib thing with the heart, but the way it was being presented to me was like, man, because it was the first time I was really in the hospital, you know, with, you know, all these nurses and everybody, you know, over top of you, you know, making a big fuss and putting all the IVs in and stuff. And, you know, my first thought then was, at the time, a friend of mine, I said, here's my ATM card. I go, if anything happens to me, just take the money out and live a good life and, you know, be happy and take care of my cat. You know? You know, that was my thought. You know, money didn't matter. You know, nothing mattered. I was running a business at the time. I didn't care. I didn't even care about the business. Wasn't even on my mind. It was like, take care of the cat, and here, take care of yourself. You know. And you would think that, you know, with all of this stuff, and you know, and just even looking at the crime figures that I put out, the 19 to 20,000 homicides a year, and all of these heart disease and cancer and so many other diseases, diabetes, and I mean, the list goes on. You go to the CDC website and see the leading cause of death. It's ridiculous how many people die. Millions of people die every year. You know, forget about the stuff they were putting on the television screens. It's like every year there's way more than that, people dying from things that they don't need to be even dying from. Excuse me. But you'd think when you would, there would be such a tenuous, you know, situation, existence, you know, that people would be like nice, you know, open, less materialistic driven, you know, greed would be, you know, would just dissipate. But instead, the so-called ruling elitists, the self-proclaimed ruling elite, I mean, I don't call them that. I call them that to define them for this podcast. They're doubling down. You know, they just want more power, more money. Right? And what I never understood about that is the idea is it's like they're sticking, you know, a stick in a hornet's nest. Like, why don't they leave the average person alone? It's the same with the media. I mean, I guess the media is into it just because it's content, so they could sell used cars and pharmaceuticals and get political ads, right? So the media are just downright, you know, mercenaries. But these politicians and these ruling elite, this Davos set, the World Economic Forum people, you know, why are they tormenting the 8 billion people on the planet? You know? And it's a hard question to answer. And you know, it really raises more questions about, you know, what's really going on and who they really are and what's this all about. Because I don't know. I mean, you know, we should basically be at peace with one another, you know? And instead of like trying to like torment people and divide people and do all this stuff, you know, live and let live. But that's not enough for them. You know, this level, it's like it's an insatiable desire for them to take as much money from you as possible and to make your life as miserable as possible. And the whole idea of life, liberty, and a pursuit of happiness. Do you ever see the sourpusses on these people? You know, these people out protesting, or these people on camera, on TV? They're all like angry, unhappy people. And if they're not angry or unhappy people, it's like the announcers have these like smirks, you know, or they are making fun of another person. Like all the things that, like when I was a kid, you were taught that, you know, they were repugnant, and there were things you would never do. Right? I mean, it's even like comedy now is like making fun, and not like in a silly way, you know, silly things. I mean, comedy in a silly comedy way, and I might have something here. Let's see if I do. I did. I once did. Where is it? You know, could never find the thing I'm looking for. This thing.
One cheeseburger, one Pepsi, one cheap.
Cheeseburger.
Pepsi, cheap. What do you want?
I have a cheeseburger and a small Coke.
No Coke, Pepsi.
Pepsi.
One cheeseburger, one Pepsi.
Cheeseburger.
Pepsi.
Cheeseburger, 4 Pepsi, too cheap.
I mean, harmless comedy. All right, you know, kind of making fun of, you know, people working in a diner. Excuse me. But it's not character assassination. Do you know what I mean? It's not lying. It's not lies of omission. It's not outright lies. It's not deceptions. But that's what's going on right now. And you know, it just doesn't, you know, it doesn't follow logic. It's like, you know, what is their agenda? You know, when is enough enough? That's the part I don't get. You know, I mean, come on. You've taken everything, right? You know, from people. And that's why I live the life I live right now. I decided about 7 years ago, I had a business, I had income, I was living about, I don't know, my cost of living was at least 10 times what it is now. At least 10 times. Probably more. And I decided to just scale down to get to this point, you know, and I bought a cheap house, but it's a house, and south-facing yard, grew a garden, you know, have my audio and video equipment, I've got my, you know, guitar, whichever finger's pointing the right direction, this one. There's an electric guitar over here somewhere. That's why I can't see. It's out of frame. But, you know, you live your life. I love music, so, you know, I've written, you know, 9 books. I'm working on my 10th. It'll be out the end of the year. I've written about 50 songs. And I've done about 250 to 300 of these live casts. I've done something like 150, 160 consecutive 7 days a week. Every morning. The morning show. Tony Caravan Live. And I have a website, TonyCaravanLive.com. Check it out. Because there's links to everything there. You know, it's not the great. I have it on Google Sites right now. Because I'm moving my stuff. I'm streamlining, and that's what I suggest to people. Yeah, I mean, unless you made a ton of money on Bitcoin or, you know, some kind of internet-related thing or whatever, Wall Street, the stock market, because I notice everybody seems to be cashing out right now. They say there's a real estate. People are buying real estate sight unseen just to have hard, you know, property, something physical with all these millions that they've made, you know. I'm on this, I'm also have a community on locals.com, TonyCaravanLive.locals.com. So if you got a bunch of Bitcoin, you know, send a fraction over. You know, you don't have to send me a Bitcoin. You could send a fraction of it. You know, I could buy myself a better chair. Gift it. You know, gift it. But what I'm trying to get at is that, you know, I could sit down, the power could go out, I'm not going to be able to talk to you anymore, you know, the grid could go down. That happens, it happens, you know. I've got this on-air light up here is being powered by something I have over here. That's kind of hidden behind the guitar and the telephone, the old-fashioned dial phone, next to the calculator that people don't use anymore. But it's one of those jackery things. I have this. There's a thing over here. It says greatsolarstuff.com. It's like a website I have where I have links to these things. I sell them through Amazon. I get like a 50-cent commission or something like that. Something stupid, if so. Nobody's buying anything. It's like this mug. Nobody bought it. Same with the shirt. You don't know what you don't know. Nobody's ever bought anything. So I'm not like, one of these guys trying to sell my wares. I mention it because I tried to make cool things that people could use that basically serve a purpose. Thought-provoking shirt. You walk into a grocery store or a place and you've got a shirt on and it says, you don't know what you don't know. That's like going to hit somebody in their, at least in their subconscious, And if the power goes out, no matter what the reason is, whether it's somebody just hits a telephone pole, I've got a thing here that I could still have, plug in a light, or plug in my sound system, and I could sit around listening to music, and do this kind of thing. If you're watching, have a beer. I always keep a bunch of ice in the freezer just in case, so I could have power goes down. Fine. Put some wood in my my backyard grill or fire pit. Take out a cast iron pan or a pot, and cook up some soup or whatever I want to over the fire. Eat food from my garden, So I don't really care about anything. As far as I'm concerned, I've got music in my life, and I spend the better part of my day doing that. And that's why I was talking before I got on this rant about podcasting and this idea of setting up this, that, the other. And it's not like I've been on the internet. Well, you can see over here the original Mac. So, I paid $2,000 for that when it first came out. I used that. And I actually was on something, I forget what it was called, Easy Link or something weird like that. And I remember I was sending emails to Australia and to other places, in the primitive days. And, so I was doing desktop publishing back in literally the mid-'80s. I jumped right into tech. I've always been into tech. At one point I had 60 or 80 websites that I was basically in charge of, had the URLs, domain names, and was doing things. And I built sites for so many people I forget, But it's like, it's like the thing I played before.
I've resigned. I will not be pushed, filed, stamped, indexed, briefed, debriefed, or numbered.
Yeah. Do you know what show that's from? I'll let you figure that one out. So, yeah, that's the mindset you have to have. You got to keep positive. You don't get caught up in politics as pop culture, because it's the same old. It doesn't really change. In fact, the things that they allow to change are things that either would happen either way. Because when Davos meets, the power brokers meet, they're the ones that are mapping out what's going to come down. And that's how it really works. And some people, that's not. It's like, man, this is public knowledge. This isn't, some guy, making up something, right? No, it's the way it is. It's the truth. It's covered, like I said, it's a red carpet event on Bloomberg and CNBC and Fox Business and whatever other financial networks there are. I'm sure they have a few more. I'm sure some of the satellite networks have financial networks, and I'm sure there's plenty of podcasters out there that have that deal with finance. But there's some interesting phenomenon going on, and I think a lot of people are hip to this, what I'm talking about. because people are buying real estate, like gobbling up real estate, sight unseen right now. And so, you know, they're trying to put this money that they've acquired, like I say, whether it's crypto or through the markets, they're trying to put it into hard goods or real property, real estate. And that's a sign, you know, because we see what's going on right now. We're seeing runaway inflation. Price of oil's up, price of food's up, price of lumber's been up for a long time, right? And so, you know, that's what you have to think about. You know, we're in a transitional period, and these people are insatiable. They're just trying to gobble up as much as they can. And that's why I jumped down to the poverty level, just below the poverty line. And some people would say, well, I couldn't live like that. And maybe you couldn't. But then again, you don't know where I am and how I am, and living at this level here isn't that bad. You know? I got a 2-bedroom house. I've got this, you know, this ridiculous garden. It grows more food than I need. I've got a doctor's office next door to me. I had cancer surgery, and the surgeon was a guy from Johns Hopkins. You know, successful surgery. You know, so it's not like I'm out in the, you know, wilderness. I could walk to a grocery store, walk to a convenience store, walk to a pizza shop, walk to a couple of bars if I want to. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, the point is, you know, you got to get your life in perspective and find out what you want. And times are changing, and we're into runaway inflation is a distinct possibility in the coming, I would say, 6 months to a year. And those who have the money are aware of this, and they're getting their ducks in order, or ducks in a row, whatever it is. So, you know, you have to find out what your priorities are. And if your priorities are strictly to live in a cookie-cutter neighborhood, you know, with a lawn that's nothing more than a golf course that you have to mow every weekend on your overpriced sit-down mower, right? One of the most annoying things in the world to me.
Okay.
Yeah, man, boy do I hate that. Fortunately, I don't have a lawn out front. The neighborhood I'm in, it's a sidewalk, big sidewalk, and I have a porch. You come up concrete steps. But I have a big backyard, and I do have a lawn there, but I've tried to plant, like I say, from fruit trees and plants and different things in a garden. But I still have an area I have to mow, but I use one of those push mowers. You know? Not gas, not electric, you know, the old-fashioned is just a push mower. They still sell them. I bought one at one of the box stores for like $99, I don't know, 5-6 years ago. You know, I don't know what they cost now, but I think they still sell them. It's good exercise, and I don't have that much of a space. But, you know, I mean, if that's your priority to have this giant lawn golf course and some aluminum-sided rectangular cookie-cutter building, maybe that you know, make a few adjustments to, a 3-car garage, you know, paying a ridiculous amount of taxes. Here's the kicker. You ready for this? The show's almost over. My mortgage, taxes, and insurance right now are less than $200 a month. Yeah. And I live in a neighborhood, and as I described, I have access to just about everything. I obviously have internet, right? And I have all this access. Less than $200 a month. I canceled my cellular service, all right? And I got one of these VO voice over IP deals. You know, I'm not sponsored by any of this stuff, but like what's Magic Jack or something. It's like $40 a year. And I have an app that I use on my old iPhone because I used to have Verizon, so I got rid of it. And, you know, Wi-Fi's ubiquitous now. So I could walk to the grocery store and I could make a phone call. I could go to a box store and make a phone call. I mean, heck, half the cars have Wi-Fi in them now. But I mean, you know, so I can get, I'm not a texter, but I can get a text. I can make a phone call from my phone, get email on it. $40 a year. I canceled my, I had satellite TV. Before that it was cable. But I canceled that last year. So, because why would I have no interest in the lies and propaganda on that. So I don't have a monthly cable or a satellite bill. And if I want to watch something, yeah, I'll occasionally subscribe to a Netflix or something like that. But you know, you could subscribe for a month, binge watch something, and then just unsubscribe. So it's like, you know, you spend 10 or $15 here or there, instead of being like, you know, chained to this, you know, thing. And that's how life is, and that's how you can live an inexpensive life. I have my own property. It's not connected. It's not a row home. You know. And so, you know, that's what I did. And, you know, you could find places like this now. You could shop online for properties. And they have pictures, right? And you could see the interior and the exterior. And you can go to, you know, Apple or Google Maps and, like, look at a satellite view and then a street level view and see where it is. You know, it's like everything else. You know, yesterday I got my, I needed a few things, and it was thunderstorming all day. Today's supposed to be another day. It's supposed to rain all day. But I needed a couple of things, so I just contacted one of these things. I think it was an Instacart or something like that. And I just went online, picked out some grocery items and some personal items I needed. And the stuff was delivered like in an hour or so. Right to my front door. I didn't even see the person, you know. They just leave the stuff with the bag. You know. So, you know, you can live. The idea is that if you're wasting time, and I did it. I was on Twitter, you know, last year, and I did all those things. But if you can make the break from social media, if you can make the break from cable TV or satellite TV, network TV, put it that way, and you just start living your life, if you don't really need to be in that, you know, high-priced neighborhood with a, you know, with ridiculously high taxes, then get out, you know. Well, I have a good school system. Look, the school systems are pretty much just as good everywhere. Hey, look, if you're some multi-millionaire, all right, and you're sending your kids to some private school somewhere, this, that, the other, look, this podcast isn't for you, and you're not listening to me anyway. But if you're anybody else, all right, even somebody who considers himself upper middle class, so to speak, think about it. You know, you almost can retire, because that's what I did. You could almost retire by selling your overpriced house, because property is hot right now. People are paying people are paying for houses like way above the listed price. So you find yourself a lower tax neighborhood. You know, I'm not talking about a slum. I'm not talking about some ridiculous thing. You can't imagine. This is a big country. Spend some time. You don't do it on a weekend. Do it on a series of a weekend. You know, I think it was close to at least almost a year from the time that I decided that I was going to do this thing until I finally, sat down in settlement and got the key, Though I have to admit, until settlement was the first time, until I got the key was the first time I was in this house. Up to that point, all I had seen was photos of it. I did walk the grounds one time, but I didn't, to physically look at it. But that was already after I had made the decision and was in conversations back and forth with the realtor. Oh, online, though, because I wasn't living in this area at the time, but I was familiar with it. So what I'm saying is that's just one option, is to just reduce your expenses to a point where you can live comfortably and you're as free from the tentacles of this corporatocracy or organized crime syndicate that's trying to rule over you and that has basically violated the Constitution. And this is the former United States because it's a corporatocracy. And Western civilization is lost and gone forever. But the fact of the matter is, this is still America, and you'll still be an American, just like when the Roman Empire went down, there were still Italy, all right? The geographic location exists, the country will exist, in a sense. It's just a matter of where you want to be. Do you want to be in a high crime area like Chicago, or the way New York is starting to get out of control? Even California? Do you want to be in those kinds of places? Or do you want to find a place where you can live, a good life, live it out, and and be happy and do the things you want to do? That's kind of it. I mean, it's a repetitive theme on my show. If there's anyone new who discovers this, check it out. Sometimes I get goofy, and have a little more fun than being this serious kind of. But I wanted today to just give kind of an overview of my kind of philosophical, viewpoint on what's going on in the state of things and how I feel about it, so that if you kind of get where my head's at. But apart from that, a lot of times I'll pull out the guitar, mess around with that. We'll get into some, goofy things like...
We have discovered that the force surrounding a magnet is really an extension of mass. How shall I say it? Mass that extends into another dimension.
Making up the rules as we go along.
That's pretty much kind of it. So...
Good morning!
That's that, and I'm glad you could tune in. Thanks for watching. Visit TonyCaravanLive.com or TonyCaravanLive.locals.com. This is my YouTube channel called Rockflux, and you'll find links on TonyCaravanLive.com for all the things I talked about. And as I decide on how I'm going to expand this show, whether it goes into podcasting or whatever, if we get into that realm, or if we just stick with this kind of black and white TV webcasting, and whether it stays on YouTube or it moves to various other locations, you'll find that information on TonyCaravanLive.com. Again, thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. And for those of you watching, thanks for watching. Don't forget to follow me, like it, subscribe, whatever it is. Feel free to make a comment. Let me know what you think. And I'll be doing this every day. As far as I know, I've been doing it every day for I don't know how many months now, 5 or 6 months. At least actually about 6 months straight live, 7 days a week. And prior to that, I was